All right, welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling this video you guys sent us from the Rich Dad channel about building wealth. It's all about adopting a so-called rich mindset.
Yeah, they really push that idea as like the key to financial success, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. They make it sound like it's the be all and end all. But is it really that simple?
Well, it definitely presents a very bold and maybe overly simplified view of wealth creation. So
Mm,
we'll dig into that, see if this whole black and white rich mindset versus poor mindset thing really holds up.
sounds good. Now, one thing that jumped out at me right away was this heavy emphasis on assets, real estate, gold, even luxury watches.
Right.
It's all about buy assets, not liabilities.
Yeah, they even kind of flash a Rolex while they say it,
Right,
which
yeah,
is
a little on the nose, maybe. But what are your initial thoughts on that, listeners? That resonate with you?
well, the focus on assets itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just that the video really zeroes in on these appreciating assets.
Appreciating assets. Okay, so things that are likely to increase in value over time, like real estate, for example.
Exactly. And they contrast those with depreciating assets. So things like cars that tend to lose value.
Mm,
Now, whether you prioritize one over the other depends on your goals. Are you looking for quick gains or are you more interested in long-term wealth building?
that's a great point. Now, the video also gets into something called Gresham's law to explain inflation.
Ah, yes.
And they use this example of a 1964 Kennedy half dollar being worth more than its face value because of its silver content.
Right.
And they say bad money drives out good. I gotta be honest, that part left me a little confused.
Yeah, Gresham's law can be a little tricky to wrap your head around.
It sounds like something out of a history book.
Imagine this. You've got two types of money in circulation, one with high intrinsic value, like a silver coin, and another with lower value, like paper money. People tend to hoard the valuable currency and spend the less valuable one.
So the good money disappears.
Right, it kind of gets driven out of circulation. And that's essentially what they're applying to the current situation. They're implying that paper money is the bad money, and things like gold, which have that intrinsic value, are the good money.
Okay, so they're tying that to inflation.
Exactly. They argue that as governments print more money, the value of that money decreases, leading to inflation. And they suggest that holding assets like gold, which they perceive as maintaining their value, is a better strategy during times of inflation.
Listener, have you noticed inflation impacting your purchasing power? How does this video's perspective on inflation resonate with your own experience?
It's an interesting way to apply Gresham's law, but wasn't it originally about something totally different?
You're absolutely right. I mean, it originated in a historical context talking about coins made of different metals.
Right.
So what the video is doing is they're taking this principle and applying it to modern inflation. It's a thought-provoking connection, but some economists might argue about how directly it applies to today's complex financial systems. Yeah, makes you think. Now let's shift gears and talk about this whole mindset thing. They're really hammering this idea of a rich mindset versus a poor mindset.
Yeah, the rich versus poor dichotomy.
Right. They argue that a rich mindset is all about focusing on value, even if it means going into debt, while a poor mindset is more about saving money, even if it means missing out on valuable assets. It's pretty stark.
It's definitely a very simplified way of looking at things. And while mindset definitely plays a role in financial success, I think framing it as this rigid dichotomy, rich versus poor, oversimplifies things a bit, don't you think? I mean, it kind of ignores the very complex socioeconomic factors that are at play. What do you think, listener? Does this rich versus poor framework resonate with you, or does it feel a little too simplistic?
Yeah, and they use some pretty strong language at times, almost like they're judging people for having a poor mindset. It's a bit much, honestly. But they do raise an interesting point about debt. They say that smart people use debt, what they call fake money, to acquire those appreciating assets.
Interesting.
They actually seem to be suggesting that debt can be a good thing.
That's where things get a little tricky.
Right.
I mean, while it's true that some people have successfully used debt to leverage investments, it takes very careful planning and a deep understanding of the risks involved. The video kind of glosses over those risks, makes it sound deceptively easy.
Yeah, almost like anyone can just rack up a ton of debt, buy some assets, and become a millionaire overnight, which we all know is not how it works.
Exactly. It's a dangerous oversimplification. The reality is that debt can amplify both gains and losses. So if things go south, it can lead to serious financial problems. Responsible debt management and considering alternative viewpoints are absolutely essential. And that's something the video doesn't really touch on.
It sounds like they're advocating for using debt as a tool, but is
Mhm.
that always the right approach?
Not necessarily. I mean, there are other schools of thought out there that emphasize minimizing debt, especially things like high-interest consumer debt. Building a strong financial foundation through saving and investing can be just as important as acquiring assets. It really depends on individual circumstances and how much risk you're comfortable with. What are your thoughts on this, listener? Does their view on debt resonate with you, or are you more inclined to take a cautious approach?
It sounds like when it comes to debt, there's not really a one-size-fits-all answer. It's all about finding what works for you, right?
Exactly. It's so important to be critical of these concepts and do your research. And if you're making big financial decisions, talk to a professional. Don't just base everything on a YouTube video.
Yeah, for sure. This video definitely makes some pretty bold claims. It's like they're trying to be a little provocative, get people riled up.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit sensationalized. I mean, that could be good for grabbing attention, but it doesn't always lead to the most nuanced discussion.
I agree. There are some interesting points like about inflation and, the importance of financial literacy. But then they start making these sweeping generalizations about certain groups like poor people or school teachers, which it just feels a little off.
Yeah, that's one of the weaknesses, I think. They rely on these stereotypes, and it's very much an us versus them mentality. And financial success is so complex, it's influenced by so many factors, it's just not accurate to paint entire groups with such a broad brush. It's important to remember that.
Yeah, it's a good reminder for our listener to, take this video with a grain of salt and do their own research. Don't just accept everything you hear at face value, even if it's coming from a seemingly successful source.
Couldn't agree more. Building wealth is a process, it's not a quick fix. It takes knowledge, planning, and a healthy dose of skepticism. It's about making decisions that align with your goals and values, not just blindly following someone else's blueprint.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into this video, what key takeaways do you think our listeners should keep in mind?
Well, first of all, understanding the difference between assets and liabilities. Even though the video oversimplifies it, building a portfolio of assets with the potential to appreciate is a solid concept.
Right. And we can't forget about inflation and its impact on your purchasing power. Even if you don't buy into the video's whole bad money argument, it's crucial to understand how inflation can erode the value of your savings over time.
Absolutely. And finally, even though their take on debt is controversial, it highlights the potential of leverage. But again, only when used responsibly. It's so important to understand the risks involved.
So, listener, as you continue on your own financial journey, remember to stay informed, think critically about the advice you're getting, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
And most importantly, remember that there's no one right way to build wealth. There are many paths to financial success. The best one for you will depend on your unique circumstances, your goals, and your risk tolerance.
This video definitely gave us a lot to think about. It was a good reminder to constantly challenge assumptions and keep learning. What are some final thoughts you want to leave our listener with?
It's like, it's important to remember that this whole building wealth thing, it's a journey. It's not a destination. And it takes continuous learning. You got to be willing to adapt. There's no magic formula. But being open to new ideas, even ones that might seem a little out there, that's a good starting point.
Yeah, this video definitely got us thinking, didn't it? And that's really the point of these deep dives, right? It's not about, just agreeing or disagreeing with the source material. It's about getting you, the listener, to think critically about your own financial journey.
Exactly. I mean, that's what financial literacy is all about, isn't it? It's about empowering yourself with knowledge, considering different perspectives, and then making your own informed decisions. Decisions that align with your own goals and values.
Absolutely. And speaking of taking action, this video, they really hammered home that whole mindset thing. So, listener, what's one small step you can take today to start aligning yourself with that wealth-building mindset? Maybe it's creating a budget or doing some research on a new investment strategy, or even just having a conversation about finances with someone you trust.
Yeah, and remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Building wealth takes time, it takes effort, and a willingness to learn. But there are so many resources out there to help you along the way.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into this fascinating world of wealth and mindset. We hope you found this episode thought-provoking and that it inspired you to take control of your financial future.
Yeah, keep learning, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep striving to reach your goals.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.